Periodically on this channel, I really love doing big ranking videos. They're super fun to make, and I usually enjoy watching ranking videos from time to time when it's something I care about. So this summer, I kind of had a theme going on. I'm a teacher, and during summer I do summer camps, and this year, during free time and at lunch and at the end of the day, I decided to turn on the original Pokémon show for the kids. It had been forever since I had seen any of it, and this little action started my summer of Pokémon. Since watching through this whole show with the kids over the summer, I've been playing the TCG Pocket non-stop, started another playthrough of Pokémon Ruby and of Mystery Dungeon for the Switch, and decided to check out the other two of the three original Pokémon movies that I had not seen. I'm not sure who grew up in the 2000s and hadn't seen the original, but I hadn't honestly seen any other Pokemon movies at all besides Detective Pikachu, and it made me decide to watch through and rank every single Pokemon movie, of which they released at least one every year from 1998 to 2020. So, once a day for almost the entire month of July, I turned on a Pokemon movie, either with my students or at home, and I can definitively say Pokemon has kind of a way lower hit rate than Scooby-Doo, man. Like some of these are rough. But let's get into it. First, we have to do something very important. There we go. Like all my rankings, I'll break these into different tiers, and these are going to be simple and pretty stupid tier. The first tier is bad, then decent, then good, then great. We're going to work our way up through all 26 films I'm qualifying, which is essentially the Wikipedia list plus a couple others I thought deserved a spot, and try to come to some divine truth about movies made by one of the most successful companies of all time, which makes more money than Disney. So keep that in mind as we go forward. Tier bad. At number 26, Pokemon the Movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back, Evolution 2019. Yeah, it's not hard to expect anything else to be in the bottom spot, and I'm not really being petty about this either, I promise. I really tried to do my best to separate this film from the original it's remaking, and purely judge it on its own merits. But honestly, from the bottom of my heart, that pure movie is also bad. The first and easiest elephant in the room to talk about is the animation, which is really just misguided. I won't just write it off as bad because there's definitely some creative merit and visual style to what they were going for, but I just really think it didn't work. The character models are too stiff in their emotions, and the textures and colors, especially on the Pokemon, are really just kind of off-putting and ugly, in a way that I really don't think they had to have been. In the opening scene, I actually think Mewtwo looks really good, and elements like the lighting are really crisp, but then it cuts to the scientist, and it looks like I'm watching like a fan animator who got their hands on really expensive models. Granted, it is incredibly hard to pull off a transition from 2D anime style to 3D animation. There are very few projects that have literally ever made that look good and made their characters look like expressive and lifelike, and that's pretty much just like the very recent K-pop Demon Hunter and Lupin III the First. But the characters here, especially the more stylized ones like Brock and Team Rocket, they just look awful. Team Rocket especially looks really creepy, and it really pulled me out of the story. But outside of that, let's talk about the movie itself. Now this will be a little bit of spoilers for later on the list, but the original Pokemon, the first movie, just doesn't actually have that strong of a script. It really carries itself a lot on the charms of the animation and the characters, and like the grand things it's trying to evoke from these silly little monsters. It's good, but the themes and the conflict are genuinely a little weak, especially when it hits the "can't we all just get along" part of Mewtwo's story. And in general, Mewtwo is just not as compelling as the writers want him to be. He's cool as hell to a kid, don't get me wrong, which is the intended audience, but honestly, even next to like Shadow the Hedgehog, an incredibly similar character, I think Shadow clears in terms of actual depth and interesting emotions that the writers take his character. So we just take this story that's really pretty fun, and that's about it, and pair it with really ugly, off-putting animation, and honestly a worse vocal cast with some really weird small changes here and there. And I just found this movie to be really unpleasant and boring. Oftentimes it just feels like watching Netflix slop, which it is, and the original movie didn't feel like that. I understand Mewtwo even less here, and this movie has more modern movie aesthetics, really showing how thin the original story is. And now I also can't deny that my biases certainly helped put this low. I hate this movie also because it's a cash grab, stripping the original of its artistic integrity for whatever bit that there was of that. And this also showed just how far we've come in Pokemon movies. This was the last one that I watched because I really just wasn't looking forward to it, and after the lore grows and grows so much in the future shows and movies with legendaries and mythics galore, the stakes here just feel kind of strange. Either way, this is just kind of a bad movie that you shouldn't watch even if you're feeling nostalgic for the original. I give it a 1 out of 5. At number 25, we have Pokémon Jirachi Wishmaker 2003. This movie is number 6 in the grand total of releases, and I swear they got bad so fast. And I know they didn't produce them, but for some reason, all of the Pokemon movies distributed by Miramax are like the worst ones possible. Which is funny, because I own a 4-movie collection that I picked up at Goodwill like years ago, way before I tried to do this video. Like, I've had it for a long time, and it just so happens that the 4 movies that they have are all the Miramax releases, aka almost all the worst ones. This one is just so annoying. There are almost no redeeming elements. The writing is never the highlight of any of these movies, but here it is especially stupid, as it follows a rejected scientist from one of the many evil teams of Pokemon, so he can find the Pokemon Jirachi and use it to revive Groudon for, like, you know, evil and stuff. By the way, I always grew up with these games, but I'm dyslexic, and I've found that I don't pronounce like most of the Pokemon correctly, so forgive me if I'm pronouncing them wrong. Jirachi can only come out of this little rock he's trapped in during the festival where a comet is going overhead, and Ash and company just so happen to be at this festival. And Ash's friend Max gets like a little psychic link with Jirachi, and trouble ensues. But this story is just so uninteresting, mainly because the main villain is just so garbage. He's not intimidating, his plan seems not really that well thought through, and we don't really get why he wants to help out Team Magma so badly. And unfortunately, the English dub voice actor for him also just like sucked, like really bad recording, audio, sound, everything. Also, the tie-in to the characters we're supposed to care about didn't really work either, because Max is just so annoying. And in fact, in every movie, I hate Max. May is okay, although she's definitely no Misty in terms of like personality that they're given in this stuff, but Max just sucks. Speaking of characters who suck, Brock is so annoying in this movie. He's never been my favorite, but his creeping towards women and like half yelling voice is turned up to 11 here, and just really made me hate almost every scene he's in. He's like, "Hi ladies, wow ladies, hi ladies, you're such a beautiful lady, yeah." Ultimately, the plot doesn't go anywhere interesting, and while Groudon looks cool animation-wise, otherwise the animation looks like it had a budget of like $5, which is a problem with all of the Miramax movies. This movie just offers so little of what I actually want from this series, and I hope to never see it again. I give it a 2 out of 5. At number 24, we have Pokemon the movie White, Victini, and Zekrom 2011. This one is such a disappointment. Pokemon Black and White were the generation of Pokemon games that I truly grew up with. I still have Pokemon Black in my DS, like literally it's right here in my DS, as well as Pokemon Ruby, and it's just such a good game. And the movies based on them are like almost cool. I wanted to love this. This film's plot could have been so good. It's about the Kingdom of the Vale, whose king used to be friends with Victini, who helped him defend and make the kingdom prosper. The king had 2 sons, each of whom had a powerful dragon Pokemon, Zekrom and Reshiram. They end up fighting and tearing the kingdom apart, and this was like thousands of years ago, and now the kingdom is relatively in ruin. But Damon, a descendant of the people of the Vale, who have now been spread all over the surrounding land, is able to connect with Zekrom and wants to use Victini's powers to restore the kingdom and reunite its people. Ash and gang are in town as usual, battling around, and just side note, Ash here is like a terrible Pokemon trainer, which is like a really funny thing these later movies do, making Ash kind of incompetent, which I don't understand that choice given Ash's early characterization. And Ash is about to totally get destroyed in a battle because of his poor decisions, but Victini decides to help. Damon's sister notices this, and they all kind of join together to make friends with Victini. This is a cool setup for the story, but the story goes in such a frustratingly disappointing direction as the plot of Damon trying to, bring his people together and restore the lands ends up being a he takes it too far plot, where the power of Zekrom and the dragon's force that they use to control is, unstable. Trying to get Victini, he ends up, hurting everyone and almost causing more damage and destroying the kingdom and almost killing Victini, which I could also forgive, but then they also double down on Damon being that was his mistake, which up to this point Damon was the most important and engaging character in the whole movie that I actually got emotionally invested in. So this direction and conclusion just ended up being really disappointing and bland to me, along with the fact that Ash and friends really just didn't have anything to do here. I mean, Ash kind of is involved, but barely. The best of these movies tie the team directly to the plot, or have Ash at least become good friends with one of our movie's leads, which ties us into the story emotionally, but this one they're just kind of there. 2 out of 5. At number 23, Pokémon the movie, Black, Victini and Reshiram, 2011. Now you may have been thinking, isn't a 2 out of 5 a little rough for something that you sounded a little bit warm on the environments and characters of? And you'd be right, this could have easily been a 2.5 out of 5 or maybe even higher, but I can't not drop them lower for the corporate head scratcher of a decision to do black and white like the games themselves and put out 2 of the exact same movie. Genuinely. This is shot for shot, scene for scene, the exact same movie as the last one. They literally just switched out that in white, Damon works with Zekrom, and in black, he works with Reshiram. Every other aspect is exactly the same. This, like the release of recent Pokemon games, feels like such a corporate and artistically void decision. But yeah, I grew up with Pokemon Black, so this one goes higher on the ranking because Reshiram is cool. 2 out of 5. And that's it for the bad ones. We're on to tier decent. Not too many really, really bad ones. These movies are really fun. At number 22, we have Pokemon Destiny Deoxys 2004. Another of the Miramax movies with equally as bad animation quality and equally as unbearable of Brock. Luckily, he gets mostly sidelined in this movie, but this one is just kind of a strange one, because a lot of these start feeling pretty boring, but this one especially just feels so lifeless, there's not much happening. I don't hate it, I wouldn't inherently call it bad, but it certainly isn't one that I'd love to watch again. The plot is one of the biggest reasons for that because, again, nothing happens. It's one of those plots that could be summed up in 2 sentences, but takes up over an hour of runtime, which is definitely not a good thing. A meteorite falls, angering Rayquaza, and hatching Deoxys, an alien Pokemon. Deoxys is looking for a crystal in a lab that took it and is using an army of robots to protect it, and all 3 of these forces fight for a really long time as other shenanigans ensue until Ash helps defeat the robots and Rayquaza realizes maybe Deoxys isn't so bad just because it was trying to save its friends. Oh, and a kid gets over his fear of Pokemon with Ash, who they made friends, and I guess that was 4 sentences, not 2. But this one has no direct villain, and most of the movie is just random forces fighting for no emotional reason and barely any plot reason, and Ash and the gang having literally almost nothing to do. Tori, the kid who was afraid of Pokemon because of a Pokemon tragedy in his childhood, is an interesting character, but not that interesting. If he were in a better written movie, I bet I would have liked him a lot more. As is, with the pacing, plot, and animation quality, this is my least favorite of the, just okay movies. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. Number 21, Pokémon the Movie, Genesect, and The Legend Awakened, 2013. This is actually goofily similar to Deoxys in aesthetics and plot. The Genesect are an ancient race of Pokemon that were experimented on by humans and turned into weapons, who are just brought to life for the first time in 300 million years, and they don't recognize the world they're in. One of the Genesect makes friends with Ash before the Red Genesect, which is their leader protector kind of guy, starts fighting with everyone around them and forcing the others to do so as well because it thinks everyone and everything is a threat to them, especially humans. They try to build a home in the park. This is the whole conflict of the movie. They build a nest there. For some reason, Mewtwo is also here and has a really weird vocal performance, and I'm not saying that just because Mewtwo is voiced by a woman here, but because, again, genuinely the dub audio quality is really poor and the performance isn't that great, and it just took me out of the movie. Mewtwo wants to help the Genesect find a place because they, like Mewtwo, don't have a home. They fight a bunch, and then Ash is just yeah, we don't have to fight you. We actually have a good, safe place for you to go and live by yourself. The end. It's so bland and boring that it almost hurts, but it's fine. 2.5 out of 5. At number 20, Pokemon Mewtwo Returns 2000. Man, you guys are gonna really think that I just hate Mewtwo after this ranking, but I swear I don't. I think Mewtwo can be really cool in concept. This movie is only this low because, like the last two, I just found it incredibly uninteresting. And in this instance, I would say kind of pointless feeling. In its defense, it's not considered one of the main Pokemon movies and is really more of a TV show special, but it is one complete project, not multiple episodes pieced together, and it is feature-length and operates as a direct sequel to the first Mewtwo movie. So I think it kind of qualifies for this list. I was actually really looking forward to see this one because I was excited to see what else they would do with Mewtwo's character after the, whole character arc of the first movie. But unfortunately, they're mostly just rehashing the story and themes of the original. Mewtwo is still debating what his purpose is in the world, and it's just kind of with his band of clone Pokemon. They've hidden themselves in a place where humans and other Pokemon rarely go, but Giovanni is still after Mewtwo, and the plot is pretty much just Mewtwo must face off against Giovanni again, with Ash kind of helping too, as Mewtwo debates again if he deserves a place in the world. And the conclusion is almost identical to the first one. He meets them and is maybe we can belong. Maybe there's a place for us on this planet, like any other creature. Just like the first movie, I liked seeing a return of the original animation and story after watching so many newer movies, but it was just a pretty uninspired story and left as quickly as it came. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. Number 19, Pokemon the Movie, Hoopa and the Clash of Ages, 2015. This one is just kind of noise, and not inherently good noise. The thing you'll see most people talk about who have actually seen this movie is just how annoying Hoopa is, and unfortunately, it's really true. He just goes around, Hoopa! Hoopa hate you! Hoopa want! Hoopa! It's really, and I promise I'm doing a less annoying voice than him. And especially if Hoopa at full power, who's huge, is also super annoying. His voice is just so grating, and the way they write his character sucks. He's just annoying. It's not a bad movie. The relationships the siblings have with Hoopa is pretty sweet, and I like the idea of Hoopa having to learn what they did wrong before getting their powers back. It's kind of a neat little storyline, but it's mostly just filler stuff happening to get to that, with an absurd amount of flashbacks. And the central Pokemon itself being so annoying in this movie just doesn't help. I did like the location of the movie, with it essentially being Pokemon Dubai, but I think it's pretty funny given that the characters from here are somehow even more pale than Ash. But yeah, outside of Hoopa being memorable for not good reasons, this one is kind of a snooze. Again, 2.5 out of 5. At number 18, Pokemon the Movie, Volcanion and the Mechanical Marvel 2016. I really like some of the concepts in this one. Ash getting attached to Volcanion just really works for me as a plot starter because, like, one, it gives Ash a way to be more directly involved in the story, and two, because it's just, like, it leads to a lot of funny things to have a Pokemon who's so grumpy and powerful and doesn't like humans, to have Ash Ketchum, of all people, attached to him in a way that he can't get him off. It just leads to a lot of funny antics that I really enjoyed. The overall plot of this is one that could have been really interesting too. Essentially, it follows a human-made Pokemon, Magearna, who is made by a person who made the Azoth Kingdom, this steampunk-style high-tech kingdom. The villain of this story is Alva, a Mega Evolution counselor who wants the mechanical heart of Magearna to power up the main kingdom castle. We're already getting super convoluted. I honestly don't remember why, and the wiki summary doesn't even mention it either, so I'm just gonna assume he didn't have much of a plan once he summoned this. But he's evil because he forces Pokemon to Mega Evolve because, you know, we have to advertise that Mega Evolution exists in this series now. Essentially, Volcanion is like the protector of Magearna and this whole field of Pokemon who have been abused by humans. So now, with Ash attached to him, Ash and the gang face off against Alva, trying to keep Magearna safe, failing, and fighting to get her back. It's a pretty interesting plot, but Alva being pretty forgettable and Volcanion being kind of a not nice person even to Magearna at times, and the plot really just doesn't give you that much to latch onto emotionally. I thought it was fine. I liked that the movie actually used Team Rocket for something, and that's cool because a lot of these just like have them in two scenes. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. At number 17, Pokemon Arceus and the Jewel of Life, 2009. Like a lot of the movies in the decent tier list, I like the concept of this movie well enough, and it executes it in a pretty fine way, but it just doesn't end up making for something that great or memorable. I laughed when I got to this part of the series because so quickly these movies changed from like fun, big adventures that they couldn't quite capture in the show's runtime, which of course are advertisements, to movies that are pretty much just advertisements for whatever legendaries they had at this time. This one's plot is trying to bring together all the kind of headaches of a lore that the previous movies have made by having way too many legendaries. Arceus is pretty compelling to me as like an all-powerful Pokemon, and I like the idea of going back in time to get humans off the menu. That's right, Ash has to go back in time to get humans off the menu. The betrayal plot and mystery are honestly pretty interesting, and I like the setting, but just so much of this movie is just lore and exposition. Like, genuinely, it's just so much talking about how stuff works, how Arceus works, how the previous legendaries operate within the lore, what the old kingdom was, all this stuff. And it's just a real drag because the plot of the movie is probably like half an hour of actual things happening. Anyway, I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. Number 16, Pokemon Forever 2001. This was the first one to really spell out the quality of Pokemon movies moving forward in the series. You'll see where the original 3 land on this ranking later, but needless to say, when we got to the 4th one, there was like an instant notice of an extreme drop-off in quality. The animation looked cheaper, and the 3D blending of 2001 was not doing it any favors. The plot seemed unfocused and all over the place in its exposition and in the way that they felt less like a movie made to be a standalone story, one designed to be a complete artistic experience, and more like one designed to get you to watch the show, buy the cards, and buy the games, because ooh, isn't Celebi so cool? Don't you want to own Celebi? Now granted, it would get so much worse than this one. This just definitely spelled the end of the initial run's kind of lightning in a bottle it seemed to grab. I actually like the idea of this one quite a bit, with the way it approaches how Celebi works, and how he used to be worshipped, And the use of cool time travel stuff in general is really fun, as Ash makes friends with Sammy. And like, they make it actually sad to see that Sammy eventually had to go back to his own time. And the cool reveal that Sammy at the end is Professor Oak is like such a cool and sweet moment for the entire lore of the series. What kind of annoys me in this one is the villain, the plotting, and the general lazy writing. The use of the dark balls and the plan of the villain just seems so kind of lame and forgettable, and the stakes are always handled in a very weird way. It feels like it definitely shouldn't just be Ash, Brock, Misty, and some random villagers trying to stop this conflict. All in all, the whole thing just feels less than it could be. Like, it wanted to be a good movie, but never really got fully finished. I think a couple more passes at the screenplay probably could have helped a lot. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. And that's it for the decent tier. Moving on, we have the good. All of these movies, I think, are at least somewhat good. At number 15, we have Pokémon, Giratina, and the Sky Warrior, 2008. Man, there's just so little to say about this one. Nothing inherently bad, but the way they write the story with Giratina is the same mix of plots that tie into Arceus's movie, and it's just like a bunch of overcomplicated, boring exposition for not all that interesting of a Pokemon, just so they can establish the lore how they want to. This one introduces the Pokemon concept of like the opposite or mirror world or dimension, a dimension intrinsically tied to the normal world and ruled over by Giratina. And the plot of this movie is kind of hard to explain. A Pokemon scientist tried to recreate the power of Giratina to go in between the dimensions at will, but he learned that this would kill Giratina and put both dimensions at risk, potentially kind of pulling apart the fabric of the universe. Later, because of a collision of these dimensions, Dialga and Palkia, rulers of time and space, think that each other have made an aggression against each other's domain, or something like that, and start fighting. This fighting disrupts the opposite world, or the mirror world, or whatever, angering Giratina, so Giratina starts fighting with them as well. But this movie is actually about a fourth Pokemon, Shaman, who has the ability to like absorb and purify things, who thinks because it was in the wrong place at the wrong time that now Dialga is like actively trying to kill and eat it. Now there's a student of that original Pokemon scientist I mentioned, who has an unrelated plan to all this conflict to capture Shaman and use its powers to steal Giratina's ability and I guess like rule over the opposite world or like join the regular one to the opposite world. I don't remember. It's not that memorable. But then Ash and friends, with the help of Shaman, fight the evil lab student, and all the Pokemon realize it was just a big misunderstanding and leave as begrudging acquaintances. And all of this plot convolution is just setting up a lore that ties into this run of 3 movies, but it's just like way too much. This movie is downright confusing at best and emotionally disconnected at worst. Shaman is really fun, which is really the best part of this movie. I like that they're supposed to be like the sweet gratitude Pokemon, but they're like constantly ungrateful and a jerk, but in like a cute, funny way. It was really endearing to me, and Shaman was easily the best part. Any scene that was just like the gang hanging out with Shaman was really fun. But outside of that, this barely even operates as a traditional story. It's not bad by any means. There are some really fun scenes. I enjoyed a lot of the fights, but the overall experience just isn't ideal. I gave it a 3 out of 5. At number 14, Pokemon the Movie, Diancie and the Cocoon of Destruction, 2014. This one is really cute. I like it a lot. It really captures a lot of that like classic Pokemon charm that a lot of these movies later on really struggled to do. Diancie is the princess of the Diamond Domain. Diancie Diamond Domain. And only she can create the Heart Diamond, which keeps their world alive. But the problem is, she can't even make regular diamonds without them disappearing. So her people send her out on a quest to find Xerneas, who is said to have the power to help Diancie reach her full potential. Along the way, she meets Ash, Pikachu, and the current group of friends he's with, and Team Rocket as she starts to learn for the first time about human society and gets up to some goofy hijinks. During this part of the movie, everything worked super well for me. The animation looks great, I really care about Diancie, the stakes aren't like insane or anything, so we can have a lot of fun as a bunch of different groups, including Team Rocket, try to like capture and kidnap Diancie for her diamond making ability, despite the fact that like she can't make permanent diamonds, they all just disappear. It's so funny and it's really cute, and I was having a blast with it, especially the thieves and the fact that they get to have this kind of fun antagonist role without actually being the main antagonists for the whole story, which is a kind of charm that you usually only got in like the original show. But unfortunately, the plot kind of goes south for me when they meet up with Xerneas, because they randomly throw in a big like world-ending conflict in like the last 20 minutes of the story, which really kind of sucks and sours the rest of the plot for me. Ylvetel? I forget how to say his name. Ylvelta. Oh. I don't remember how to say the name, and I'm not going to look it up. The destruction Pokemon is asleep under the forest that Xerneas is in, and because the thieves are chasing and fighting over Diancie, it awakens this dragon of destruction from their cocoon, and then it starts turning the whole world to stone until Xerneas is just like, hey, no. And then the conflict is resolved and everyone is saved. It's so stupid, and the dumb, stupid little dragon guy is like such an afterthought that should have never been in this movie. But anyway, outside of the stupid writing at the end, this movie is really cute and I like it a lot. I gave it a 3 out of 5. At number 13, Pokemon Heroes 2002. I don't have too much to say about this one. I liked its vibes a lot. The location being essentially like Pokemon France/Italy, and the movie mostly being set at night gave it such a cool feel. Like, I want to go here. I want to be in this movie. And having two Team Rocket full-on like spies was such a fun, goofy choice, even if their motivation and defeat are a little silly. I also liked that this isn't like needlessly complicated. Ash befriends Latias and Latios and the people who protect them in the city, and Annie and Oakley are after them, and that's it. What's crazy is this is one of the worst performing Pokemon movies in the entire series, which I don't think is at all deserved. It's easily the best of the Miramax run, even though the animation similarly looks pretty cheap, and it actually makes for a compelling, if not simple movie that feels somewhat like a real movies movie, you know? Like, it has a lot of stakes and plot and momentum that a lot of these movies lack. I give it a 3 out of 5. At number 12, Pokemon The Rise of Darkrai 2007. The first in the convoluted Palkia, Dialga, Arceus, Giratina saga, and easily the most compelling by the fact that Darkrai's power set is just like super sick and makes for a really fun movie, and it also doesn't have the baggage of trying to do nearly as much as the other two because it's the first one. This one picks up where Palkia and Dialga are fighting, but their fighting disrupts Darkrai. Does this sound familiar? But people think Darkrai is evil just because his powers are like nightmares, so like people are gonna not like you. But with all the destruction, they think it's his fault. Ash gets pulled into the conflict by Darkrai's nightmares, which are just super fun. I love the nightmare sequences. And a bunch of Pokemon fighting later, Darkrai dies, but they stop the fighting, and Ash convinces Palkia to restore the town, and then at the last second it turns out Darkrai didn't die. Wow, it's so cool. I really remember so little of this plot. Its biggest problem is that it has no real character work, because it's all just like fighting. Like, all three of these movies, there's just so much convolution and fighting and weird plotting, but this one is so high because I found the conflict and fighting to be the most compelling and emotionally engaging due to a lot of the dream sequences tying Ash into the story and the comparative simplicity of this one. It's a pretty cool movie. I give it a 3 out of 5. Number 11, Pokemon No, I don't remember how to pronounce this one. I gotta look this one up. I can't mispronounce the main Pokemon. Let's... Oh no, my props. Guys, I'm a real Pokemon fan. I swear. Zoroark. Zoroark. Oh, it's pronounced exactly how it's spelled. At number 11, Pokemon Zoroark Master of Illusions 2010. This is truly the last one to feel like one of these more bland, forgettable product advertisement movies. I put it this high because it is definitely the most solid of any of the movies that kind of feel like that, but it still doesn't exactly feel like a full-on, like, wow, this is like a good project, like a really solid artistic piece. This one just really engaged me because of the plot. An evil businessman who absorbed Celebi's power and uses it to see into the future and control the media and companies, which is just like super cool and evil, is now back, and he's using Zoroark's power to create illusions to make people think that legendary Pokemon are attacking the city, so he can clear out the city of people and grab Celebi's power again, just as he's returned to the city for the first time in decades. An evil businessman's powers are fading. It's a full-on like Scooby-Doo style plot, as Ash and the team not only have to fight off the bad guys and befriend the little powerful Pokemon of the movie, but they also have to figure out the mystery and expose the evil businessman to the whole town. It's really a lot of fun to have the team fighting against such a competent feeling villain who actually acts like a real villain of the real world, and the setting, which is like Pokemon Belgium, I'm about to go back there, is really fun, especially since like, yeah, I'm gonna be back there soon. All in all, it's a super fun little adventure story that, while it doesn't have the most emotionally compelling stakes or anything, makes for a story I know I would have loved growing up, and one of the more unique plots any of these movies has ever had. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Number 10, we're in the top 10. We have Pokemon the Movie, I Choose You 2017. This might actually be one of my more controversial takes to people who get really intense about originals and remakes, which I may have seemed that way earlier with the original movie remake, but I'm much more against like changing like animation mediums to something that I think has a little bit less stylistic merit than outright remaking like the plot of a TV show or something into a movie. But again, I try to judge things even then on their standalone merit and not just for their remake qualities, their adaptational differences. Maybe that's a little bit of hypocrisy with the Mewtwo one being so low, but whatever, that one sucks. This movie is a loose remake of the original season of the Pokemon's original show, showing Ash's origin story when he first started his journey and connected with Pikachu, with some massive changes to said origins, including completely different companions, completely different stakes, and completely different lore that matches the newer lore that didn't exist at the time of the original. Specifically, this plot centers around a rainbow feather off of a Ho-Oh, and man, do they make some big creative swings with this plot. Stuff like hearts of evil corrupting things and sending Ash to a dimension where Pokemon no longer exists, and Pikachu literally talking, which I'm sure really pissed off a bunch of people. On top of all the craziness in the plot, it unfortunately also shoves in a bunch of really out-of-place plot beats from the original show. Some of them work, like rescuing the Charmander from the rain, leading to like the conflict with the rival of this movie, but we did not need to have like a 15-minute bye-bye Butterfree plotline. But honestly, those moments are one of my biggest and only complaints about this movie. That and some of its melodrama of this being like a grand legacy friendship between Pikachu and Ash that just doesn't exist yet in the context of this movie, I think really feels cheesy and out of place. Otherwise, I thought this movie was really fun. It looks great and has a pretty trackable plot, and I really enjoy a lot of those unique creative choices it decides to make. Yes, Pikachu talking in this movie is genuinely really embarrassing, but again, what can you do? I think it's genuinely a great place for kids to start with this series if they haven't watched the original show and don't really want to, and it genuinely works pretty well on its own as just like a fun and emotional story. It's cool. I gave it a 3 out of 5. At number 9, Pokemon the Movie, The Power of Us, 2018. This one is so goofy, it's so strange. It's like the Magnolia of Pokemon movies, and I kind of really appreciate it for that. It's this grand, sweeping story about a bunch of different people with different skills and drives coming together, just like the name would suggest. And it genuinely just works pretty well with that ensemble. The characters are really fun and unique for the series, especially the character designs. They're just like all so good in this one. Like, I really love the world and the art that they created in this one, and you get a really solid sense of setting with the Wind Festival. It's just a beautiful looking movie. Unfortunately, as much as I liked these characters and the ideas this movie is going for, it's also kind of a contributor to its biggest downfall, which is that the plot gets really convoluted really quickly, and the conflicts having no real villain doesn't exactly help either. And as the plot goes on, it only gets more spread thin as characters go this way and that, and the finale feels much less like a Mission Impossible movie where all the threads that have been spread apart come together as the team did the impossible, which are kind of the stakes set up here, and instead more like each individual thread just kind of did its own thing and came to some kind of small conclusion. All in all, it's a really good and memorable entry with cool locations, good characters, and some really fun moments. But I had to really strain to even remember the full plot of this one, which is a shame. It is also a 3 out of 5. At number 8, Pokémon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea 2006. Man, this has to be one of my biggest hot takes on the list. So many people hate this movie, and I don't know why. I wish I had watched this movie growing up, because I would have adored it. I mean, it's got Pokemon, pirates, and spies, which maybe are like the coolest collection of things to childhood me. I put it in my review when I first watched this movie that it has the vibes of like a real movie, which is something I've said before is lacking from a lot of these Pokemon movies. This one just feels so like grand in its scale, and yet self-contained to actually focus on telling a compelling story within its runtime, whereas a lot of these other ones kind of feel like they're just like little segments talking about the legendary of that generation. And the action and the chase scenes are genuinely really interesting in this one. You can feel a strong sense of direction with this movie, with intentional shots and camera movements in a way that a lot of these movies don't have. The music goes super hard, and the plot is really intense and over the top, and there are like characters and stakes that feel important. Even May, a character who in these other movies is just like a piece of paper, I really loved. She's given a bunch of depth in this. There's just so much about this movie that I love, especially the villain and the concept of Pokemon Rangers in general and their goofy power sets. Phantom is such a fun pirate. I love goofy pirates like this so much. And a Pokemon pirate is like as inspired of a choice as to include Team Rocket in the original of these stories. That sentence didn't fully make sense, but you know what I mean. But yeah, it just has a lot of plot drive and scale that you don't get in a lot of these movies, with adventure locations and chases and mysteries. It's not perfect by any means. Its pacing is still a little meh, but for a Pokemon movie, I genuinely think we're starting to get like almost as good as they get, unfortunately, but it's still like really fun. I love this movie. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. At number 7, Pokemon the Movie, Kyurem vs. the Sword of Justice, 2012. Pokemon Black and White are absolute train wrecks of films, so imagine my surprise when I watched this movie from the same generation, and it was an absolute breath of fresh air. I love that as these movies went on, they were less afraid to make like the Pokemon just like straight up as much of characters as the humans. This one specifically leans into it super hard like Diancie did, and has the story being driven by Keldeo, who is pretty much the main character of the movie, and his personal quest to deal with his flaws and find his real strength as he tries to join the Pokemon group, the Swords of Justice. Now, I just have to say, he's maybe one of the ugliest Pokemon designs out there. I was really ready to just like hate on this movie and dog the design because it's such a dumb looking Pokemon, but like the movie ended up being good enough that I can't just dog on his looks the whole time. What makes this film work so well in a sea of kind of mediocre Pokemon movies is its simplicity. The plot is simple. Keldeo got the real Swords of Justice frozen by taking on Kyurem before he was ready, which is like the final test to get into the Swords of Justice, and because of this, he gets scared and runs away. Because he runs away, Kyurem spends the whole movie chasing him as Keldeo runs into Ash and his friends, who convince him to go back, try and save the Swords of Justice, and stand up to his mistakes, facing the fight head-on with the support of his new friends. So the rest of the movie is literally the gang just trying to survive attacks from Kyurem and make it back to the cave to save their friends and battle him properly. It's super tight and paced like an absolute bullet. Because of the setup, there's very little time wasted around for convoluted beats and flashbacks to happen, and as the story goes on, because it knows that Keldeo is like the real main character that we have emotional investment in, and that Ash and company are just assistants, the gang slowly dwindles down, acting as diversions in the chase from Kyurem, so we don't have a bunch of needless characters dragging down the plot. They just do so many things like that are just good decisions for pacing and to not overcomplicate the plot, that this movie genuinely felt so refreshing to watch after watching so many others. And while it's still nothing life-changing or even my favorite, because like, who likes Keldeo as a Pokemon, it stands out as being really solid in its pacing and plot, which is not a compliment you can often give these. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. At number 6, Pokémon Lucario and the Mystery of Mew 2005. How could I not love this movie? Look at the poster. Take a good look. A good hard look at the poster. And tell me this doesn't look like it's about to be the greatest movie of all time. And yes, they actually do dress the Pokemon up in little medieval outfits. That's amazing. This movie is very convoluted, sure, and it does that anime thing where it invents a whole new kind of power for that universe that makes like characters mega super powerful and gives weird implications for the story, but man, I just love what this movie is doing so much. Where other movies I have praised for feeling like real movies, this one I will praise for feeling like a goofy story pulled straight from a kid's imagination. With wars of kingdoms far off, time travel, Lucario being a moody little guy, plot twists and mysteries, and aura. Not just like aura as in like aura, though it has a lot of that too, but like they add in this mysterious force called aura that certain people can use and see if they're connected enough with their aura, and it controls powers having to do with like the beginning tree where Mew hangs out. It's super complicated, but not in like a headache-inducing way like later movies with intense lore drops, but more in a way that's like nodding to stuff that kids will kind of understand and using that as a backboard for really fun set pieces, plot moments, and amazing little Pokemon antics. Like, I love that Mew just keeps, like, flying around and messing with all the Pokemon for no reason. It's so funny. And genuinely, I just had a blast with this one. I would watch it again anytime. It's so cool. I love it so much. 3.5 out of 5. Number 5, we're in the top 5 of the ranking. We have Pokemon 3, the movie, 2000. This one is just so crazy. I love it. It's like more akin to a Satoshi Kon movie than a Pokemon one. The vibes are immaculate, and the animation still has that 90s softness to it that that's just so delicious. Not only that, but there are like stakes in this movie. Molly's dad is just like straight up dead, like doesn't come back. The unknown work as like an amazing force of childlike cosmic horror, and I love plots about people making like alternate realities, especially small contained ones. I can't recommend this enough. It's one of the most unique stories in the entire series, and while it has some issues with pacing and the writing not being quite as emotionally cohesive as I would have liked, and the whole issue, like always, of Ash and the gang feeling like a little bit of an afterthought to this unique plot, it doesn't take away much from just how good the vibes are here. And Ash's mom is involved in the plot, which is like so funny and like a really unique way to tie into Ash, which rarely happens anywhere else. I love this early era of Pokemon so much for just how much mystery they were able to imbue the world with. For as much as I love the extended world that we have now, the idea that there were so many secrets to be uncovered and that we knew very little about what Pokemon actually are and where they come from and where legendaries come from was just so compelling to me, especially as a kid. And again, this movie is like a real movie plot. Molly loses her father in a freak accident with the unknown at an archaeology site, and then uses their power to create an alternate world where she imagines Entei to be her father, and Ash's mother to be her mother, creating this alternate family that Ash not only has to defeat in battle, but she has to break her out of the fact that her parents are gone and they're not coming back. And he's just a kid who's missing his parents too. So it really carries some nice emotional weight to the actual conflict in a way that almost none of these movies do. And we have Misty. I've missed Misty so much. She's easily one of the best side characters of the entire series. It's really sad to me that Brock is the one who stayed so consistent. This movie is so cool and remains one of the best, an easy top 5. Still, a 3.5 out of 5. At number 4, Pokémon, the first movie, 1998. And maybe my hottest take yet for all you nostalgia heads. I honestly debated dropping this even lower. Listen, I'm super nostalgic for this as well, but the remake especially shows a lot of the thematic flaws that the story has in it, which are definitely here in this original script as well. It's just not as strong or as interesting as it wants to be. The conflict isn't complicated and makes for a poor analogy for any kind of minority struggling to find its place in the world. That being said, I can't help but love this movie. I love the vibes here. Again, the mystery of the world is turned up to 11 in this one, as it being the very first feature-length movie and the first time they ever tried something this grand with the world of Pokemon. The animation and the atmosphere really bring it to life. So many iconic set pieces and locations I have burned into my memory. The docks as the storm rages on, the height of the fortress that Mewtwo has made when they first arrive, it's all so effective. And the plot itself, for as silly as the conflict is from a thematic standpoint, remains at least really emotionally interesting and pressing for the characters. You really feel like Ash and the gang have met their match, and perhaps that the world has met its match. And the dark gothic vibe that this film has really brings that together. So it's far from perfect, and I'm sure nostalgia has even blinded me somewhat for putting it this high, but I can't help but love this movie. It's the kind of movie that I want to be inside, that I can remember all of its sights, sounds, and smells, and it's just also like a world of Pokemon that is gone and we'll never really see again. A relic of a different time for the series when there was so much mystery to be uncovered. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. At number 3, Pokemon Detective Pikachu 2019. Forgive me for putting this in the top 3, it's just so good. It's really dumb and makes some baffling choices. Arguably, the whole final act is a bit meh, but the story, stakes, and vibes that this movie bring, I really, really enjoy. The biggest flaw of the whole movie conceptually is that the plot with Mewtwo and human evolution has absolutely nothing to do with Tim's personal conflict and Pikachu and like the emotional weight of the story. This is why the third act feels so much less engaging than the rest of the movie, because we've moved beyond the personal stakes of Tim looking for what happened to his dad, and instead we just have some evil guy doing Mewtwo shenanigans that don't even make that much sense to do. But man, I do love it when kids' movies just get to be like kids' noirs. I love noir genre riffs so much. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, to even like the freaking Chip and Dale movie. It doesn't take much for these kind of movie scripts to really, really bring me in. And using the Pokemon world, a world that I love so much, to do that, and doing it pretty effectively for most of the runtime, really puts a smile on my face anytime I've turned this on. And man, this movie looks surprisingly good. It was shot on freaking film for some reason, and the digital effects of the Pokemon, besides their textures sometimes being like weird and desaturated for no reason, look really good. Like the blending is incredible. I mean, Pikachu, you never once think while watching the movie, oh, that's like a CGI thing. Your brain just fully recognizes it as like a living, real Pikachu. It's really impressive work. Again, this really appeals to the childhood me who loves nothing more than a kid on his own, teamed up with other kids investigating some big conspiracy. That was like half of the stories I wrote growing up. Of course, there are like way too many Ryan Reynolds ad-libs, and of course, a little bit too much of the runtime is spent on being like, oh, look at this cool Pokemon thing. Of course, the plot kind of falls apart a little in the end, but like, man, I genuinely get really invested in Tim and Pikachu's relationship, and I think it's super sweet, fun, and engaging. This is a really good movie, and I enjoyed watching it in theaters and at home. I bought the freaking 4K. I can't suggest this movie enough, honestly. If you like Pokemon, this is a really unique place to take the series, even if some of its decisions are really stupid. Like, I love that it spends so much of the series, like the entire series, giving really strong justification for like the kind of weird concept that these almost human-level sentient creatures are like put into little Pokeballs and forced to fight, as so many people will say. Like, they give a good, compelling reason for why Pokemon like doing that. And this movie is just like, no, we're actually cool. And our entire city, yeah, we don't use Pokeballs and we don't do Pokemon battles. It's like, what if the Pokemon want to battle? That's such a weird choice. But anyway, I really love this movie. It puts a smile on my face. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. At number 2, Pokemon the Movie 2000, 1999. This, to me, is just peak Pokemon. Everything about it is what I would want from one of these movies conceptually. Unfortunately, like all the others, it's held back and remains just really good and not great. This, though, for the time and for what it is, rocks. It takes the raised stakes of the first movie and takes them even bigger, dealing with the fabric of the universe and the forces of nature in a way that would become really tired later, as like all the movies did it, but this was the very first time they ever did it in the series, and it was like lightning in a bottle with genuine feeling stakes. The world gathering together for what literally might be its end, as the mass exodus of Pokemon come to just watch. The great airship straight out of Castle in the Sky, the prophecy that only Ash can fulfill. It gives one of the most compelling stories for why Ash is always the chosen one who lucks into being in every part of the story in the series, and it's because he's so determined to be the very best that there ever was, and to help others be the best, and to love Pokemon. His sheer drive and want to do the right thing makes him the perfect counter to Lawrence III, the scheming rich villain who just wants to collect for collection's sake, who wants to be the best, but for a different reason, making this really interesting philosophical conflict between the two characters. The set pieces are super fun, and the grounding of the world is so engaging and genuinely intense, and the plot itself is really fun too. It's honestly a shame that its toes kind of get stepped on by later generations in terms of the whole connection to nature thing. Now, it has some problems, as I said. One of the biggest ones is that Lawrence is barely in it once the plot really starts to get going, which makes the stakes with him feel very weird, and there really seems to be no consequences for him at all, even though he, like, almost ends the world. And the pacing is so-so. It's fine. It's just a little slow. But I love the mythology this presents, and it would definitely be the go-to for me to turn on, and probably my personal favorite of the series. With that being said, I don't think it's the best one. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Now we move on to the only great Pokemon movie. In the number 1 slot, Pokemon the Movie, Secrets of the Jungle 2020. Listen, I can't believe it any more than you can. This is the most recent Pokemon movie to come out, a Netflix movie at that. I never once expected it to be top ranked at all, let alone genuinely the top spot and the only great movie in this list. It's still not life-changing or anything. In fact, it's not even my favorite just because of personal tastes. I think I would definitely choose to watch 2000 over this, but I think out of all 26 Pokemon movies, This is the only one that feels this well conceptualized and executed, with an actual frightening villain, well set up character stakes that literally made me almost cry at one point, really solid pacing, some of the best animation of the whole series, and a good use of Ash and Pikachu. This film follows Coco, a child who was abandoned in the woods after a mysterious accident killed his parents. He's raised by a Zarude, a mystical Pokemon that lives in the woods around a magic tree that keeps the jungle alive via a stream coming out of it. They have very strict rules, including no outsiders, and they kind of think of themselves as the de facto rulers of the jungle because they take care of this tree. It makes them better than everyone else, and they are allowed to take anything from anyone else because they take care of the sacred tree. They kick out this Zarude and Coco out of their society for bringing in an outsider, and years later Coco thinks he is a Zarude, and then meets Ash in the jungle and finds human society. And then from there it becomes kind of Jungle Book meets Avatar. And that's really where I'll leave you with it, because it's genuinely a really good movie and has interesting plot points. And if you've made it this far and are a Pokemon fan, I can't recommend that you check this out for yourself enough, because I know I wouldn't if I wasn't making this video, and I think this is one of like the least watched Pokemon movies. I was literally mouth agape when I found out how emotionally I was being pulled into this movie, when I actually felt a sense of like dread and like genuine emotional evilness from the villain and what he does in the plot. And it has such strong emotions between the relationship of Coco and his Zarude father. And I mean, it has some animation scenes that genuinely rival Disney's Tarzan, which is incredible coming from the series that has like in almost every movie terrible 3D CG patched over their 2D. I'm still so surprised by this, because this movie is so aesthetically not what I want from a Pokemon movie. Even plot-wise, it doesn't offer the kind of mystery and mythos that I personally love from Pokemon. Yet, its actual writing and filmmaking on display elevate this Netflix original that no one has seen to what I would say is probably the single most compelling piece of Pokemon feature-length filmmaking. It's a shame that it doesn't get any better than this, because this movie still isn't like perfect or anything, and I wish more movies on the list matched this level of writing, but what can you expect from Megacorp Pokemon that hasn't released a good Pokemon game in years? They created a fantastic world, one of the most recognized and loved worlds ever created, and I'm so glad I've got to explore so much of that I never had before, for as boring as some of it was, and for how much it really piqued my childlike interest. Spies and pirates and gods and wonder and Pikachu dressed in little outfits. The world of Pokemon is one I'll gladly tune into anytime, even when the movies turns out to just be big ads. And this one just so happens to be so much more than just an ad. It's an actual great movie with really interesting plot points, great twists, emotional characters, and just good filmmaking. Check it out if you haven't. I gave it a 4 out of 5. And so we've done it. We've explored over 2 decades of Pokemon cinema, and it was quite the little journey. I love doing these big long rankings from time to time. They help me a lot when it comes to getting through a tough or busy time of my life, because it gives me something to put so much focus and time into. And this has been a really tough and busy time of my life. I've always loved Pokemon. It's been such a prevalent part of my life, my entire life. Growing up in honestly what's probably the peak time to be growing up with Pokemon, I imagine. And I really hope we get more of these movies. As of 2020, we haven't gotten a single new Pokemon movie. That's 5 years without a Pokemon movie, after over 2 decades of movies every single year. Now, was that the best release schedule to put out a good movie? No, not at all, but I hope we continue to get people creating stories within this world. Maybe a New Horizons movie would be really cool. I'm a teacher and I work with kids almost every day, and I can't tell you just how much Pokemon is still having an impact on kids and on their imaginations. So if anything, as we go forward with the series, I hope we get more stories that will provoke the imaginations of kids more than anything. Movies that help them come up with their own stories and questions and worlds. I had a kid in my class once that made his own Pokemon for an activity we were doing, and you could tell how proud he was of it. So go watch some Pokemon, go play some Pokemon games, have some fun in this world, maybe make some Pokemon art. I made a Pokemon TTRPG once, just because I love the world so much, and because I think the world that they created was really beautiful, even if it's kind of like corporate slop half of the time now, which makes me really sad. But thank you guys for watching. If you watched this long, you're awesome. You're cool. Personally, you specifically, you are very cool. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. I do ranking videos, probably like one big one every year, as well as reviews and essays, and sometimes I'm doing like political analysis, sometimes I'm doing thematic analysis, sometimes I'm doing emotional personal analysis, sometimes I'm just doing simple reviews. I do a lot of stuff on this channel, and I have a lot of fun making this, and of course I've loved seeing it grow, and I hope to continue growing. I would love to be able to do this more full time, but we're growing, we're having fun, and I'm busy, but I'm glad I get to share some of my love for Pokemon on this channel. It's not really something that I've talked about too much on this channel before. There hasn't been much because I haven't really wanted to do any particular Pokemon game videos. I think so many other people have said better stuff than me about like the individual games, especially the new ones, which are like kind of garbage. So I'm glad I got to talk about all these movies. This was super fun. Pokemon are super fun. Anyway, go watch some good movies. Enjoy life. I love you all, and goodbye.